Good afternoon. My presentation will be based on immune response to MMR vaccines given by aerosol or subcutaneous injections. As a speaker told some minutes ago, measles and rubella endemic transmission is currently interrupted in the Americas regions. Most countries of the Americas have introduced the MMR vaccine in their routine immunization programs. Measles, rubella, and also congenital rubella syndrome are targeted for elimination in some other regions of WHO. Aerosolized vaccines mimics the natural via of virus entry, induces serological, mucosal, and cellular immunity. The method is easy of administration. The aerosol immunization avoids adverse events related to injections. This method saving cost due to not use of needles and syringes. Potential alternative for mass immunization campaigns. As a general objective, all the following clinical trials that will be present in this time is to evaluate the immunogenicity and reactogenicity of different MMR vaccines applied by aerosol or by subcutaneous injections for booster immunization in young adults and children. Immunogenicity has been defined as, according to the following indicators. Seroresponse is greater or equal to 4 increase regarding the baseline levels. Seropositivity for measles is considered any titer greater or equal 120 millinternational units per milliliter. Rubella is considered a titer greater or equal 10 international units per milliliter, and mumps is defined at dose titer greater or equal 100 units per milliliter. As another indicator of immune response, we considered geometric mean titers, and reactogenicity was defined as any event, adverse events presented in at least one period of incubation of the wild viruses of measles, rubella, or mumps. When we tested monovalent or single measles vaccines, the clinical following was for 20 days, which is the largest incubation period for measles. When we evaluated the MMR vaccines, we used 28 days for clinical follow-up, considered that 28 days is the largest incubation period for mumps. The following clinical following included additional visits at 2, at 4, at 6, and 9, and at 12 months after immunization. This is the device we used to deliver aerosol vaccines. The device is formed by a compressor, a commercial compressor, joined to a nebulizer, and which deliver the reconstituted vaccine transformed into aerosol particles, which are delivered to an applicator tube, which ends in a cone tube. Inside this cone, we introduce a disposable paper. This disposable paper, which changes with every individual we vaccinated. This is the results for adults using the device that I defined previously. When we use MMR vaccines, the response to the booster response for measles was 100% by aerosol versus 90% by injection. Rubella was 100% by aerosol versus 22% by injection. Mumps was 74% by aerosol versus 23% by injection. We need to consider that almost these individuals had highly percentage of seropositivity at baseline, because this is an adult population and because the immunization coverage in Mexico are very high. This is another study in adults, in young adults, performed in one University of Mexico with the students from 18 to 25 years of age. Again, this is a booster immunization. Almost all students were seropositive at baseline, and under this condition, aerosol was successful, induced higher seroresponse rate compared with two other vaccines applied by injection. In contrary, when we analyze immunological results for rubella, we found that there is equally equivalent seroresponses between aerosol and injected by MMR to vaccine compared with injected trivalent vaccine, which is an MMR vaccine too. When we analyzed the results for mumps component, the surprise was that the Rubini strain in the trivalent vaccines did not present immunoresponse compared with the injection of this same vaccine and with the other commercial vaccine given by injection too. This, in the follow-up during 12 months after immunization, all titers induced by booster immunization declined, but the highest declination in antibodies after immunization was for the mumps component, which is epidemiologically consistent with the incidence of mumps, not only in Mexico, but also in other countries like European countries and USA too. Mumps is of difficult control. Okay, and this is the booster dose for children, and in children, almost all children were seropositives at baseline levels, and the difference in seroresponse was statistically different for rubella, and they were equivalent for, was statistically different for measles, and there was equivalent for rubella seroresponses. This is the other nebulization device that we used. This is a portable device operated by batteries, and we have some experiences with this device in adults. The booster response in adults was of 44% for measles, almost 15% for rubella, and 33% for mumps. GMTs was high in each one of the components of the MMR vaccines. When we tested this device in children, immune response were equivalent for measles and rubella components and was different for mumps. We found that using different nebulizer and different device, we could get better immune response to mumps when applied by aerosol. This picture described the GMTs before and after immunization. As you can see, GMTs were much higher than baseline titers detected by the strategy in the clinical trial. In summary, booster dose for measles, EC, Edmondson-Zagreb strain. This strain is attenuated in human cells, was more immunogenic by aerosol than by injection. 98% of the vaccinated by aerosol remained seropositive 1 year after immunization. Rubella, equivalent immunogenicity between aerosol and subcutaneous injection in all the clinical trials. Mumps, Rubini strain was not immunogenic by aerosol, but Leningrado, Zagreb, and Jerry Lynn strains were immunogenic in adults and in children when was applied by aerosol. Safety. Only mild adverse events were reported by investigators. Aerosol immunization is an acceptable practice for users of the vaccination program. It could be used as a rapid operational strategy in vaccination campaigns and for outbreak response. Booster dose in adults and in children at school age has been systematically successful in the clinical trials performed in Mexico and South Africa. This method could reduce the cost of massive intervention for booster vaccination, avoiding costs of syringes, needles, safety boxes for deposited needles, and payment for the collection and destruction of these wastes. Aerosol immunization could prevent a proportion of blood-borne infections. This method could be used for second opportunity campaigns for control or elimination strategies. Thank you.